Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be my next Avatar Legends RPG video, and in this one we're going to be taking another look at the Republic City Settings Toolkit. This time specifically the big adventure that is included in this, and that is the Quick and the Quarrelsome. But also one thing I forgot in my first really long video was the adventure hooks that they actually give you for Republic City. So I'll be going through them at the start, and then we'll get straight into the Quick and the Quarrelsome. So the adventure hooks, these are basically ideas of stories that you could theoretically do if you wanted to. It's just very kind of quick, one paragraph explanation of here's a potential idea using the setting that you've just kind of gone over here. Now, it is not necessarily the case that these are fully canon. It's very unclear in a lot of cases if this is exactly how it's meant to be kind of viewed or not. But they mention certain kind of new stuff, new characters. So I think the idea is most stuff, unless it's very obvious it's not meant to be canon, is meant to be treated as canon to a certain extent. So first one here, the Wayward Mech. So Kimiko is a brilliant technologist who developed a mini unmanned mech that can be driven via remote control. The inventor wanted to do a quick test of the mech's effective distance and decided to fly it out over the city, though she was explicitly told not to by her boss. During the test flight over the city, Kimiko's invention was grabbed by a member of the Agni Kai triad who saw it flying. The mech is a prototype, and a lot of yuan has been poured into its development. Kimiko needs someone to help get her prototype back before her boss realizes it's gone. So there's one just using the idea of kind of mechs, mech development, and specifically the Agni Kai triad. So that's somewhat interesting. Amon's Hour is the second one. Someone has been hijacking the airtime of the radio program Central Beats, playing a recording of Amon's equalist speeches. Central Beats is losing its loyal fan base and gaining a lot of unwanted attention. Now the radio station is threatening to stop the show until the culprit is found. Emmy Emerald, the show's host, needs someone to stop the hijacker before it's too late. Last time the broadcast was hijacked, the faint tune of Republic City's University's song could be heard in the background. So this is obviously relating to the fact that in the university there is a bit of an undercurrent of the kind of revival of the equalists, including one of the professors, of course, is quite heavy with his involvement in things. But in general, like, there is an undercurrent of equalist kind of rising again. So a bit of an interesting one there, just an investigation into equalist related stuff there. It's kind of interesting. Next one here is the Heir's Escape. Ananda, heir to the Stone Meadows steel mill, has gone missing. His aging parents were set to sign over their entire business to their son. Ananda is normally a steadfast, diligent man, and when he didn't show up after a few days, his parents knew there was something amiss. A private detective tracked Ananda all the way to the Republic City Underground, where the trail went cold. The elderly parents need someone to connect with the citizens of the Underground and locate their missing son. So, someone who's kind of important to one of these kind of like factories has gone missing, Underground is involved, seems somewhat interesting. Missing money. Garab is a low-level clerk in City Hall with a big problem. Over the course of a few months, he noticed minor discrepancies in the bookkeeping for Republic City's rebuilding funds, which add up to a startling sum of money. Someone is taking money from the city, and Garab is sure it is someone who works above him. He needs someone to quietly inquire about the missing money and help him find the right culprit. So just some kind of missing money, nothing too fancy going on there. Last one is just called Spirits. Factory workers in Green Meadows leave small gifts at a spirit shrine where local spirits lays. The spirit's colourful appearance is a welcoming sight for the people rushing to work, and the shrine is a beloved place for most inhabitants. However, in the dead of night, someone pilfered all the small gifts left for the spirit, and the spirits all left in turn. Holo, the owner of the factory whose land the shrine is on, wants someone to find out who stole all the baubles and return them, so the spirits will hopefully return. So, interesting enough. You kind of wish they'd gone into detail, explained the spirit a little bit more, but that's probably for the next setting toolkit, which we do expect to be the Spirit World one. But, yeah, they are the 5 adventure hooks, and then we get into the main adventure for this one. This is the full-on big adventure that they go into a lot of detail on here. That's why the whole video is kind of based on this one. The Quick and the Quarrelsome. So, yeah, big adventure, Korra era, and so on. So the premise here, let's go over this. The Badger Mole Triad, which we know from the Underground, runs thrilling and illegal tunnel races in Republic City's Underground. But Harmony Park Corporation has their own track and has convinced the Republic City Police to crack down on the illegal races. Mako asks the companions to help the Badger Moles. Though they're a triad, they're also kids, and it's not too late for them to turn their lives around. The companions must resolve the conflict between the Harmony Park Corporation, some corrupt police officers, and the myriad racers to try and help the Badger Moles avoid incarceration or destruction. So, there is your basic setup for this. It's obviously a underground racing themed adventure here. Now, the legend NPC who's going to be in focus in this one is going to be Mako, as you, of course, got from that. So, usually what this means is that Mako is your quest giver, effectively, for this adventure, if you choose to do this as part of the game. What it means is his involvement, specifically in the events throughout the whole adventure, is pretty minimal. He will be there sort of at the start, maybe a little bit at the end, maybe if there's a giant fight, and that's the way it turns out, he will be involved in that. But in general, the idea is that Mako will not be particularly involved. He has brought the player characters in to make them help, get them to do a lot of the work because he effectively can't. So that's kind of where we start off here with sort of the kind of more detailed summary here. Yeah, the adventure starts with the player characters in a Republic City meeting with Detective Mako, who's calling in a favor after pulling the companions out of some hot water for that stunt a few months back. So again, this is the way they typically do it, is that the player characters for a specific adventure with a legend NPC know them from some sort of a prior thing. You create a little bit of a backstory for how your characters roughly know Mako, and so this is how he is familiar enough with these characters to ask them to help out on this situation. So it's just explained here, he has been keeping an eye on the Badger Mole Triad, which is of course a triad made up of mostly like kids. They're all very, very young. There's kind of no adults in this triad, and it's not a particularly like crazy criminal focused triad either. So it's very much something that you understand why Mako would want to get involved in this. This is very reminiscent of, I suppose, kind of in a way how far Mako and Bolin got involved in the triads, and he kind of feels he can help them get back on the right path. So from here, we basically just get the idea that, yes, it's about illegal underground tunnel racing, which the Badger Moles are the most heavily involved with. But there is a problem because the Harmony Park Corporation is trying to basically capitalize on the popularity of tunnel racing. So they've actually built a racetrack on the surface that is meant to sort of mimic the style of track that an underground circuit would actually be. So it has sort of walls, but it's open on the top so that spectators can see it. But of course, as ever with this sort of thing, the official version of it isn't being done in the same way that makes it as exciting as it actually is underground. So this is causing a bit of a problem. Money is being wasted here, but what if they got rid of the illegal stuff and actually made it so that their stuff was like the only one kind of left? So we get the introduction here of Kyoko, who is the Harmony Park Corporation CEO. She is trying to basically work with the Republic City Police to get the illegal races shut down. Because we get this sort of idea that Lynn, as the chief of police, has been pretty light on this. She hasn't really seen it as being a particularly bad problem down here. It is a dangerous sort of like motorsport, but they have put certain safety measures in place. Nothing has gone super wrong up to now, and again, like a lot of the stuff in the underground, the official kind of view on it is to just sort of let it be and not get overly involved in it. Because, of course, the Badger Mole Triad isn't really doing anything that kind of crazy illegal. It's not like it's being run by like the Triple Threats or something like that. It's a group of kids trying to kind of make a life for themselves here. So the idea seems to be here that the time limit on this adventure is a couple of days. That is how long it will take for the police to come in and fully crack down and basically shut down the underground kind of racing tunnels. And Mako, of course, doesn't want the kids to get into trouble. And that's the kind of general setup idea here. Now, the idea for the potential resolution of this is that the Badgermoles do have a lead on a actual track above ground that they could use and renovate for their races. And if this was to be the case, they could actually basically go legit. And this would be the way to get them out of basically being a triad and into just young organizers of an actually popular motorsport discipline. But of course, with a big business involved, the idea is that the fact that they want this kind of legitimate track is going to draw in the corporations. Like, what if they buy it out from underneath them? That would create a different kind of version of the same problem, even though it's the most sort of ideal solution to this. The idea seemingly being that like the Badgermoles need to do kind of one final race to sort of like generate enough money to buy the legitimate track, and then hopefully kind of things will go on from there. Now, because of that, it means a lot of the characters that are involved in the kind of story here are the different kind of racing teams that are involved with tunnel racing. But there is also the kind of police force aspect of this, because we get that one of the main things going on in this story, that is, it's kind of why Mako is the focus, why the police are even going in on this, despite the fact that Lin isn't super eager to kind of go after the tunnel racing, is that you have to, for the sake of this venture, treat Lin as being suspended. That this is something that happens because of the politicking going on within the Republic City Police Force, because they want the main police force character to be the new character here, Officer Xiaobo. Xiaobo, who we talked about in the first video on the Republic City RPG, this ambitious character who wants to be the new chief of police, basically. And so we just get more of the approach being taken here of this person wants to crack down on all illegal activities. They view Lin as being a little bit soft on this specific kind of crime. And so Lin has been suspended while this is kind of looked into, basically. This is why Mako has to kind of bring in the kind of group of heroes to make this happen, why he can't really act on his own, and why the Republic City Police Force is, for the most part, the kind of enemy, almost, to a certain extent in this one. But the idea seems to be that, like, as soon as, like, Zhu Li finds out about this, Lin will be reinstated. But, again, in the same way that the crackdown is coming in a few days, it will take a few days for it to be found out what has happened with Lin here. So that's the kind of whole idea here. Xiaobo's ambition here, he's the sort of temporary kind of chief of police while Lin is suspended. And then we also get into the idea of the Kyoko, the CEO of Harmony Park Corporation. She is basically in an alliance with Officer Xiaobo. So she is hoping to sort of help him get into the position of chief so that Lin is out of the way, so that she can perform more sort of corporate kind of illegal activities. And they both kind of help each other that way. That's why he's actually invested in taking out the illegal activity here, is because that's what she wants. That her business venture at the moment is this racing, so she can get the illegal stuff shut down. It will draw people towards her official version of it. That's the idea of what's kind of going on here. Now, as we'll get into the characters, there's a little bit more going on with Kyoko and kind of her family, but we'll get into that in a moment. We then get a brief introduction to the different racing teams here. Of course, we have the Badgermoles themselves, the Triad, the young Triad, and their leader Hibiki. Again, some of this stuff was already covered in the underground section of the actual main book itself. So we have the Badgermoles themselves, who want to obviously become more of a legitimate business when it comes to the racing. We also have the Tiger Monkey Triad, which is quite interesting because the leader is actually the older sister of Kyoko, who runs the Harmony Park Corporation. So there's immediately a kind of conflict going on there, but they also established that Hibiki and the kind of second in command of the Tiger Monkey Triad basically both have a crush on each other, because she, Zolzaya, the second in command of the Tiger Monkeys, used to be a member of the Badger Moles, and they kind of had this kind of blossoming relationship before she joined the Tiger Monkeys, and that's a bit of a complication in all of this. There's also the Spider Cat Triad. Now, I don't believe we've seen a Spider Cat before, but it seems like an interesting kind of combination there. But this is revealed to, of course, be a triad that is basically manufactured by Kyoko to spy on the underground racing that's going on. They are led by Mally, M-A-L-Y, who obviously works for her, but actually has fallen in love with racing, and so there's a kind of complication in there on that side of things. So lots of complexity going on with different kind of groups. There's the Fireball Trio, who are basically the kind of celebrity trio of racers down here. They're not a triad, they are just, you know, the most kind of official kind of celebrity involved in all of this. So that's a bit of an interesting kind of idea. And of course, just before we get into more detail on the characters, we get some ideas of escalations that could happen. Like, what if a cave-in happens? What if people get injured? They could have a thing where the Spider Cats sabotage different kind of automobiles before the race. You also have a bit of a setup here where there's a particularly young member of the Badger Moles who's kind of being manipulated to kind of betray them. What if that betrayal actually results in something quite serious happening? What if there's a triad fight down here? What if the police force actually kind of get involved and shut things down? Because again, the idea with these is that it is a very open story. We don't get a specific idea of how this ends. So the implication is usually that it ends in a somewhat positive way, but you don't have to do that in your version of the story. So the Badger Moles could come out of this with a legitimate business, but it also could be the case that the CEO wins and kind of defeats the triads and kind of gets what she wants. So that's kind of the whole idea here. There's a kind of a few ideas of, like, the companions have convinced the Tiger Monkeys, but the smaller triads only agree to the plan if the Fireball Trio do as well. They're split on what to do. The companions learn that Kyoko's planned to buy the Badger Moles track from underneath them. What if that happens? Then there's a big chase to kind of get there first to see who kind of buys it and stuff like that. It's, there's some interesting ideas here. They also kind of cover at this point, when you're making your characters, form an idea about how you met up with Mako. What is the backstory that allows this to sort of happen in the first place? It also gets a bit into the core story setup, which is obviously you have the meeting with Mako, but the idea of how this is all going to work is you are going to enter the underground as a racing team. Your team of 4 or whatever are going to be another racing team. So you're going to be acting like racers among the other racers, and you're going to see where you go from there. But also you can choose to maybe go down the business road and investigate the corporation. Maybe you can get more involved in the police and see what's happening there. So there's various different kind of ideas about what to do and stuff like that. They kind of set up the idea that the first thing that should happen is that you participate in a race to kind of prove yourself to the other racers. Then afterwards, that is going to be the way for you to kind of meet, like, Hibiki from the Badger Moles and some of the other characters, with the idea being that, like, if you come dead last, you probably won't get a lot of respect. If you win, you'll get a lot of respect. But once you just don't come last, you'll probably get a reasonable amount of respect. That's sort of the approach that you should be taking here. Again, they also established that it's probably the harder path to go down, directly trying to have a meeting with Kyoko, the CEO, just because why would that happen just randomly? But you know, it's meant to be a more action-based racing kind of situation, but that is the kind of core idea. So that brings us into more detail on the characters here. So I'll bring up the kind of basic list of characters here, and we can kind of go along with that. Again, the actual book has a lot more detail on these characters, but that is the idea. So you can see Mako's description here is kind of funny. Handsome, stoic, swoon-worthy, and a detective that asks for the player character's assistance. Then we have Officer Zaibo, who is disgruntled by Chief Beifong's leadership. Kyoko, as I said, is the Harmony Park CEO, who would do anything to get what she wants. We have the Badger Mole Triad. Hibiki's the leader of them. Tashi is the very young member of the Badger Moles, who is kind of being manipulated to maybe give information to like the CEO and stuff like that. The Spider Cat Triad is actually Kyoko's mercenaries. They're posing as a street racing triad. Their leader, of course, is Mali, who is actually a new airbender who's from the Foggy Swamp tribe, which is kind of an interesting one. The Tiger Monkey Triad is, of course, led by Kyoko's sister, but it's a secret. And they are an all-woman triad as well. Quiye, I'm not sure about the pronunciation on this, is the leader. That is Kyoko's sister. Zolzaya is, of course, a former Badger Mole triad member, and also has the kind of potential for a romance with Hibiki, is the idea there. There's the Fireball Trio, and again, we'll get into these in a little bit more detail in a second. They're the celebrities down here, Police Force, and Harmony Park Guards. So that's the basic idea. So the more detailed description that we get of Mako is, again, it covers his backstory with the triads, doing what he can, the kind of connection to the Badger Moles because he kind of sees them as going down a very similar path that he is, how he does struggle at times with his job because he wants to do kind of what's right by like helping people, but he also has to be the police officer, and so the situation politically that he's in at the moment means he has to bring the player characters in to make this happen. And especially with Beifong being suspended for the sake of this thing, he's in a particularly bad situation because, of course, Zaibo views Mako as, I suppose, the biggest threat to what's actually going on here. Then we get into Zaibo, who is described as being an earthbender, metal bender as well. An interesting idea on his technique. He's recognizable for his expert use of a new high-strength fabric-like material embedded with metal pins. He can use metal bending to control the pins and wrap the material around his foes quickly and easily, with greater flexibility than strips of pure metal, but as much binding strength. So that's an interesting kind of like materials evolution on the whole kind of metal wire spools that the officers have. Zaibo has taken the approach of going for something that is lighter. It is kind of like what described that he can carry several spools of this while it's still being the same weight as a much smaller amount of the normal metal spools. So it gives you the idea, like, this character, if you ever come into combat with them, is going to be actually a bit of a threat, because that is a bit of a unique fighting style, even if your character is perhaps used to fighting metal benders from the police force. So that's an interesting idea there. So yeah, we get a little bit of backstory here. It says here he initially is like kind of affable to a certain degree, but Zaibo believes that in the absolute rule of law, if there's an issue with the law, it should be revised by authorities, not broken to spare criminals. Beifong initially took him under her wing, and he looked up to her as a mentor. But Beifong's recent shift in leadership earned her scorn from Zaibo. He is hurt to see his former mentor change in such a drastic way, and coming to the conclusion that Beifong has grown unfit for leadership, he has allied himself with Kyoko with the intent of taking over as chief of the Republic City Police. So that's that idea there. Then we have Kyoko herself. So as described here, she is nothing if not cunning and resourceful. She's reinvented herself several times over. And the most recent version of that is that glamorous, wealthy, powerful, and benevolent. So there's an interesting backstory here because, of course, her sister is Kiyue, who is the superior bender. Their parents died without Kyoko ever confronting them, leaving Kyoko with an unresolved sense of inferiority. What's more, they didn't leave the girls any money now they were penniless. She and Kie lived together on the streets for a while, even found some success running cons together. But they kind of split ways at a certain point, and one went more down the kind of legitimate path and kind of became involved in kind of like the big business. The idea is that Kyoko took the money that they had saved up and left Kie to make her own fortune. So there's a big separation between these two, and she is effectively hiding even the fact that she has a sister. So that's a bit of an interesting one. And again, this is another corporation that wasn't particularly explored earlier on. It was obviously a different character in Harmony Park that we explained as like being the person who owned a lot of the other places. So this is a kind of different person involved there. Badger Mole Triad, of course, we've covered quite a bit already. They're all kids. They're involved in the racing, of course, but they want to kind of go legit. And so there's a lot of hope for them, of course, because they're more of a family-based triad of all these kind of kids protecting each other. Hibiki is obviously the oldest member of the Badger Moles. A lot of responsibility on his shoulders. But then we also get the idea... one of Hibiki's biggest motives outside of the races and the Badger Moles themselves is his crush on former Badger Mole, Zolzaya. When she left the Badger Moles to join the Tiger Monkeys, he took it as a betrayal, but he still longs for a return to the days when she was his closest friend, and he can't help but dream they might become even more. But he treats her kind of with hostility at the moment because he hasn't got over the betrayal. So that's that. Tashi, of course, is very close to Hibiki, it's described here, because they are family. But after they turned Kyoko down for the kind of, buying them out effectively, that sort of thing, Tashi individually, feigning concern for the child's well-being... Mali approached Tashi, feigning concern for the child's well-being. She provided the much-needed comfort Tashi wants, and suggested there might be a way for the Badger Moles to go legit. So there's a bit of a manipulation going on with Tashi, who's only 8 years old. And obviously this character's going through a lot of worry, because what if Hibiki finds out that there's this kind of pseudo-betrayal happening here? What's going on? We go into the Spider-Cat Triad here, who are, of course... working for Kyoko to spy on the tunnel races to figure out what's going on. But they also have fallen in love with racing and kind of want to get involved in it. So they kind of want the success of the Badger Moles to actually happen so that they can kind of go legit and in a way don't have to be this kind of fake triad, kind of almost working as like, criminal informants for someone involved in kind of bigger business. So they're just sort of worried about like basically betraying Kyoko will put them down a different path, and that's their fear in all of this. Mali, of course, is the leader of the Spider-Cat Triad, and of course originally a non-bender from the Foggy Swamp Water Tribe. But once she began to show signs of airbending, it caused great alarm and confusion in her community. She did go to Air Temple Island to train under Tenzin, but she's a free spirit, and she chafed under Tenzin's tutelage, and she eventually left, a kind of failure. They do describe that she has some level of airbending, but it's very kind of specifically honed to make her particularly skilled when it comes to being the bender in tunnel racing. Which again, the idea of tunnel racing is that you have a driver and a bender in the car. The bender is allowed to kind of use their bending to assist with anything. And the implication here is that Mali can do some sort of like kind of, aerodynamic kind of stuff, clearing the air out of the way to go faster, that sort of idea. So that's the idea here. Again, she likes the racing. She's a bit worried about, Kyoko's kind of ruthlessness now. Like, why are things getting so serious when it's just about racing? but she seems loyal to Kyoko, but there's a chance you could be able to kind of like turn her, is the approach there. The Tiger Monkey Triad, of course, this is the one that is led by Kyoko's sister, of course. And it's an all-female team, and they are related to all aspects of racing. So they're experts in racing, basically stealing cars, trading cars, modifying cars, inventing kind of like new technologies about it and stuff like that. So they're completely focused on the kind of racing aspect of this. So they don't run them, but they do just participate in them, and they feel quite heavily involved in the scene, and they don't want it to get shut down, of course. And they're going to do what they can to keep it the way it is. So if they have to fight with the police, they'll do it. If they have to fight with the HPC, the Harmony Park Corporation, they will do it. And they're basically allies, effectively, of the Badger Moles overall. But if the Badger Moles maybe take things in the wrong direction, they will maybe turn against them. That's sort of the idea there. So a pretty reasonable triad, but they're kind of protective about the racing is the idea there. And then we have Kiyue, who, again, Kyoko's sister. Mostly silent older woman. The few words that she does speak are imbued with quiet wisdom. So she leads the team very, very effectively. She's a metal bender as well. It's described here that she shapes new parts for her racer to make it go even faster. And they experiment with new technologies. And again, she still has a lot of hope for her sister. So that's the thing here. It's not this kind of, you abandoned me, took all the money. She's okay with that. But she's worried about the path that her sister has taken and how kind of ruthless she's going. She doesn't wish to harm her sister, but she will oppose her if it gets in the way of, endangering the tiger monkeys or the racing happening like full stop. So quite interesting stuff. Then we have Zolzaya, of course, who is the second in command of the tiger monkeys, who transferred over here and rose through the ranks, is now second in command here. And it says here, while the Badger Moles have supported her in developing her race-related skills, she was outpacing them. With the tiger monkey, she is considerably challenged, but she misses her old friend Hibiki. Hibiki viewed her departure as an act of betrayal, causing a rift between the two, even though they both secretly harbor feelings for each other. And she wants to return to the closeness that they once shared, of course. So that's the kind of idea here. If it says here, if Kyoko hurts Hibiki in any way, Zolzaya will become hellbent on revenge. So interesting idea there. And then this brings us into the Fireball Trio, who I don't think I've explained particularly well so far, but we'll go into these here. So the Fireball Trio are a group of young adults, Yuka, Saya, and Mayu, who grew up in Republic City together. Each of them is from a wealthy background. They all fled their childhood lives after Mayu's Fire Nation traditionalist parents rejected his coming out as trans, and they all changed their names after their emancipation from the golden shackles of their parents. So they now operate a garage on the edge of the Roku Plaza district and earn extra money by tunnel racing. And they've become so good at this, they are effectively celebrity tunnel racers, effectively. So Yuka is the driver, Saya is the firebender on the team, and Mayu is the mechanic of the team. And the idea here is that the triads are sort of the ones, and the business are the ones kind of fighting for control over the racing. But whichever the Fireball Trio sides with will actually get quite a lot of extra support. Their vote kind of matters in things a lot. So we also have the Republic City Police and the Harmony Park Guards involved in things, in terms of the action and so on. And then I guess I'll just show you this particular section here. So we do get a little bit of a section on the drivers and their vehicles, just establishing that, like, hey, when you get into the actual racing, here is what the actual kind of dynamic is. So the Badger Mole team, they're in the car that is the Badger Mole Reliable Racer. And it's Hibiki, who's an experienced earthbender, and he used to be with Zoldaya driving, but now he has to pair up with Ona, who's an up-and-coming racer. So you can see the basic idea here is that from the stats in the game, they have how much damage the car can take, and then heat boxes, I believe, is something to do with the speed, effectively, of like the more heat boxes it has, the faster it can go without like overheating, effectively. So they're all balanced in this sort of a way, where some of them aren't particularly durable, but are super quick, and the reverse. Yuka and Saya, so this is, of course, the Fireball Trio's kind of car here. And again, you can sort of see the idea. Like, this team has an Earthbender, this team has a Firebender on their team, because I think that is the rules of it. It's one bender on the team, one driver. Mali and Hojing. So Mali, of course, being an Airbender, so has improved her airbending, especially for racing, and is a force to be reckoned with. And you can see the idea here of just like certain teams are a bit kind of imbalanced, other teams are better than other ones, and so on. So Kiyue and Zoldaya is probably actually maybe one of the best teams. Earthbender, Metalbender, and Zoldaya is a great driver, having experience with the Badger Mole. So interesting kind of stuff there, just to further establish the dynamics there. And then, of course, your team, I guess the idea is you choose who's going to be your driver, which bender will be your extra in the car, and what type of car you're going to bring in. I think it covers it here that day. Yeah, I think they establish Mako gives you an impounded racer that was taken in by the police, of course. So you're basically given some random triad, kind of like Hot Rod, effectively, that's been sort of like modified specifically for racing, and that's going to be your car for this. So I think they covered the details on that already. So Mako sets you up as best he can going into this. Then we just have some important locations here. So of course the focus here is mostly on the underground, but there is also, of course, the ability to go down the more business road. So you might go to like Harmony Park and go to the Harmony Park Corporation headquarters. So we're dealing with the secret tunnels in the underground, of course, and we know about that. Of course, there's not a lot of room to work around with. It is described that the area where the spectators underground are is kind of in the middle of all the track. And it is protected with multiple rows of kind of earthbender made stalactites and stalagmites. So that's their way of kind of creating safety barriers for people if there is any crashes and kind of debris going into the crowd. They have effectively like a mesh of kind of like earthbending kind of pillars, quote unquote, in front of everyone. So, safety has been thought about, at least to a certain degree, obviously. So yeah, we also have the Harmony Park Corporation headquarters, which is, if you have to go meet with Kyoko, that is where you are going to do it. There's the Rolling Harmony Raceway. So this is the raceway that is the Kyoko's attempt to make this like official on the surface, trying to kind of capture the feel of underground racing on an actual racetrack, but it's not particularly popular, and so because of that, she's trying to get rid of the illegal stuff to draw more attention to her actual stuff. The Badger Mole current hideout, obviously we know it's just underground, and it changes a lot because the underground is like that. So it's just described, each triad has their own kind of room member, each member has their own room, but there's also a kind of communal living space in here. We have the Tiger Monkey Loft and Garage, which is in Harmony Park, and this is where the triad kind of meets up and does all of their stuff. But it's also it's a place of art as well, and business. So they kind of also have an art gallery there related to the kind of automotive industry. So that's a bit of an interesting one. They also describe some of their inventions and stuff like that they have. Previous inventions have included an automobile made entirely out of ice, an automobile that camouflages to its surroundings, and an automobile that can drive straight up vertical walls. So they're really on the cutting edge of kind of unique kind of car-related technology. Then we also have Test Site B, which is a bit of an interesting one. This is owned by this very old character called Tian Hui, who is a wealthy philanthropist who was involved in the early days of kind of automobiles kind of being tested. So he made this giant sort of like test facility for automobiles, but it kind of got phased out as people got up to speed on what things are. But he loves the racing so much, he is willing to sell the test site to someone for a pretty small price if they want to use it to continue kind of racing on. Now, there's a little bit of confusion between, like, this is not the place that the Badger Moles are planning to buy. That was described earlier on in the book as being a former Futures Industries test track. So this just seems to be a separate area where I guess other people can test out. But still, it is an interesting idea overall with what's going on. And then they do give you some ideas for, like, if you wanted to make this more than just like a one-off adventure, you could have a much bigger plot related to Kyoko and the Harmony Park Corporation in the aftermath of whatever happens here. You can really play into kind of some of the stuff going on within the police force. Like, what if you made your plot something that actually involved, like, Chief Beifong being out of action as the police chief for a while, and the attempt to get her back in. Again, these are all just ideas about the direction going forward, but you know, there's definitely some interesting kind of stuff going on throughout this. But that is basically everything going on here. I would say it's probably slightly on the weaker end overall of the adventures, just because it is very focused on racing and very focused on a specific type of racing, like to the point where it almost doesn't even reference that, like, wait, is just normal automobile racing not that much of a thing? It doesn't matter too much, but it doesn't maybe come across quite as interesting as, say, the Movers and Shakers one did. That is more about the kind of acting kind of industry. That seemed like a slightly more interesting setup, but maybe the action is slightly better in this one. Like, the underground is, of course, a very, very interesting, intriguing area, and there's certainly some kind of very, very interesting kind of like aspects of stuff going on here. They also, I suppose the very final thing here is probably that I skipped over. There's a few examples of some escalations that you can do to just add some extra kind of dramatic pacing to kind of what's going on here. Again, they kind of more just establish the idea of, like, because they're in underground tunnels carved out by badger moles, like, rocks might fall from the ceiling basically here. Cave-ins could happen. There's even, like, the potential idea of, like, what if Hibiki is almost like forced into a situation where, like, he has to sort of like give in to the kind of corporate demands and kind of just see what happens here. That's certainly a possibility as well. What if the Tiger Monkeys are forced to kind of defend racing and go into, you know, conflict with the Republic City Police or the Harmony Park Guards? That obviously would result in them being kind of like targeted, of course. What if the Badger Mole hideout gets targeted? And then, of course, what if some kind of action takes place at the Republic City Police Station? Like, if characters do get, like, put in jail, maybe you need to break people out and stuff like that. That's the kind of big deal here, of course. So there's some nice ideas throughout this, some different triads, some, I suppose, not as super dangerous triads here because they're very racing orientated, but interesting, nice stuff. And at the very least, even though Mako doesn't seem to be particularly involved in things, you like the idea that they understand his character very well. His willingness to help people who come from a similar background to him and, you know, try and get them out of that kind of life of crime, and that they could go on to become the people who make kind of more, maybe motorsport into a much bigger thing in the world of Avatar as we go forward. And I think it's an interesting idea of, yeah, like, why not do some sort of thing, bending incorporated with racing in the same way that pro bending is bending incorporated with more of a team sport. So I like what they're dealing with here, but in the comments, let me know if you have any questions on this one, or just your thoughts on the Quick and the Quarrelsome adventure and what's going on here. But yeah, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.